Welcome to another Tracking Trends Thursday with Kristen Mason Coreas, owner of the Homestay Mason team. Today is Thursday, September 4th. All of my kids are now back to school. I know probably any of you who have kids might have gone back to school sooner. My kid was like the last one to go back to school. Yesterday was her first day, so that gives me a little bit of relief at home that I now no longer have kids around here needing my attention, needing to feed them lunch, etc. So all kids probably are back in school now. Hopefully that does get us all back into more regular routines. Because it was Labor Day weekend this past weekend, we're going to see that show up in the data as we take a look at this. So in regards to interest rates, those have come down, and that is influencing refinance activity. So basically, when interest rates come down, we tend to see more mortgages, more mortgage applications. Those mortgage applications either might be for new purchases or for refinances. And in this case, it does talk specifically, what does it say? Refinancing is up 40%, 47%. I care more about new homes as what we're obviously looking at most often. And so interest rates as of today are at 6.5, a touch lower than they were last week, lower than the monthly average and the year-long average. So we're creeping here back towards the low point that we were at. Are we going to reach 6? I don't know. I haven't heard anyone really say that we think we're going to hit 6. But so 6.5 is a relatively comfortable place to be. And projections were that we'd be kind of around there, around now and towards the end of the year. The Fed meets in a couple of weeks, and so we'll see if they lower their interest rate then and if that does impact the mortgage interest rate. But it seems like lenders have already kind of baked in that expectation that the Fed is going to lower their rates. So we may or may not see further reduction of mortgage interest rates. In national economic news, the top 3 points here talk about what's happening in the economy, which is slightly negative. And when economic news are slightly negative, that is what influences the Fed oftentimes to reduce their interest rate, because their interest rate and also more, when they bring their rates down, it's because they want to spur economic activity. So this news here does seem to be in line with what the expectation is that we expect to see the Fed reduce their interest rate when they meet in a couple of weeks. Economic activity and hiring has been flat for recent weeks. Tariffs are weighing on businesses and consumers, is what the news here says. Job openings dropped a lot, 7.18 million in July, the second lowest since the pandemic in terms of job openings. Less jobs for people. That's not good economic news. And again, when economic news are bad, that's better for interest rates. So, and factory orders slid in July. That was not something I probably would have taken that out. In any case, single family housing spending edged up in July, and home buyers are backing out of deals. Actually, this was something I was going to talk about. So that's what kind of grabbed my attention on this page, is that this is in fact true. I am seeing this myself on the front line. We've had a buyer back out of deals. We've had buyers back out of deals on us. So this is a real thing happening on the ground, that home buyers are backing out of deals more often. Purchase deals are falling through at rates not seen in recent years, signaling growing caution. Buyers are more cautious. That is really, in fact, true. And purchase mortgage applications. So again, this is not refinance, but interesting enough, purchase applications fell 6% from a week ago, but they are up 17% year over year. That means new buyers applying to buy homes. And again, refi applications did rise for the week and for the year nationally. In the Mid-Atlantic region, we're talking here about Virginia, DC, Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Delaware, and New Jersey. New listing activity, that's a measure of how many new listings come on each week, are back up. They were down last week, but they're back up. So there's not a trend there, right? So what we saw last week was a blip. New contracts are higher than last year, so that's probably a sign of more buyer activity as a result of the reduction in interest rates. Contracts are up for the third week in a row as buyers are taking advantage of the lower interest rates. Showings are tracking over the last 2 years. Increased inventory and in combination with the reduced rates are bringing buyers back to the market. So that is what we're seeing in the Mid-Atlantic region and in our larger DC metro area. Showings are, so this is just up until August 31st. So that does not capture Labor Day weekend. So year over year, showings are up, but they're down week over week. And that's because it's August and less people are out there looking. You should see showings come back up as we get into September. Purchase contracts up from last year, basically flat from last week. Time to contract longer by 6 days from last year at a median of 33 days, flat week over week. New listings in the DC metro area, these numbers are up 8.8% year over year and 14% week over week. That's interesting that new listings went up at this time of year. I wouldn't usually see that. Median list price also up. That's a number that I've been saying I've been expecting to flatten out, up 2.4% year over year and 7.4% week over week. Opportunistic sellers may be trying to take advantage of that increase in buyer activity by increasing the prices again. We'll see what happens, how that plays out. Active listings, the total inventory on the market is up almost 30% year over year and down a touch, 4.3% week over week. Now in our hyper-local market, we look at Homes by Mason, specifically at Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, and Falls Church, where we do most of our business. So this is the raw data. So new listings and new under contracts are slightly less than what they were the week before and slightly less than what they've been on average for the year. So no major concerns there. And then when we compare week over week, we are down. So this data does include the Labor Day weekend because we at Homes by Mason actually run this from Thursday of last week to yesterday. So this does include the weekend, and that's why this totally makes sense. So when you're including Labor Day weekend, we had less supply and less contracts over a Labor Day weekend compared to the week before. And then in this case, we're looking year over year, comparing Labor Day this weekend to Labor Day last weekend. So this was pretty interesting that actually the supply was up compared to last year, compared to last Labor Day weekend, and also contracts were up compared to last year, Labor Day weekend in 2024. So then I took a look at the demand to supply ratio, and this is something I don't usually share with you. So this is just the raw data. So we were around 70, oh yeah, here it is, 79% is where we were. So that's a measure of how many new listings came on. Of those listings, how many contracts gobbled them up, basically, leaving some inventory left over. And so this year, we were at 79%. Last year, the demand to supply ratio was 107.7%. And now that is eye-opening for you. So this is kind of what I understand because I've lived this, but to help you understand what the market looks like this year compared to last year and previous years, this shows you that demand to supply ratio was often at or above 100% last year. So we just didn't have any inventory left over in some cases. In some cases, inventory was shrinking, which is why it was really, really, really hard to be a buyer when there was so much demand and not enough supply. And this shows you why it's a more comfortable place to be a buyer these days, because this demand to supply ratio was only above 100%, slightly above. It looks like 3 weeks this year. And so most of the year, you can see we've kind of been hovering in the 80% range, which makes it more comfortable. Not as much competition, not as much demand. So it's a relatively good time to be a buyer with interest rates where they are and with inventory being where it is. So days on market in our hyperlocal area has gone up again. And that number, I should put the actual numbers on this chart. I'll get it here for you a second. And you can see interest rate has held flat. So the days on market in our hyperlocal area average is 32. So up from 29 the week before. Still, it's a comfortable place to be for buyers. So that is your tracking trends information for this week. Thank you for watching. And as always, if you ever want to talk with me about how this data influences you and your family and your decisions, feel free to reach out. Love to talk about this stuff. You can call me or text me at 571-210-1866. You can get on my calendar using the link below. You can find a time that works for you or email me at kristen@homesbymason.com. Thanks for watching and have a great weekend.